Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just maybe give one more minute. I know our operators in Alberta are attending a luncheon, or not a luncheon, attending an info session for some changes to regulations here. So it might be a small group, but we will record this so that we can share it with anybody who is not able to make it today. So we'll just, might as well just get started. So welcome to our Childcare Lunch and Learn. The intention of these lunch and learns is to provide some operator to operator insight and support for you, some real scenarios that you may be facing in your centers and just your day-to-day operations. We're very grateful to ChildFriendly and to Wayne, who's here today from ChildFriendly, for their support in making sure that these lunch and learns happen every 2 weeks for our sector. And Wayne is here today too to answer any questions you might have if you're looking for some support in your program with a program like ChildFriendly that can do, the admin, take some of the pressure off of you for tracking and reporting and all of those things. Today's session is all about raising the bar, making sure that you are providing professional childcare as best you can with your policies and ensuring the quality of care in your center. We always like to start with a disclaimer that this is just really an informational session. It's meant to support operators, not meant to be seen as any kind of government representation. We're not here from the government of Alberta or from licensing in any capacity, just here as ourselves. So today's session is all going to be about raising the bar. So professionalism, policies, and quality in childcare. We're going to, sorry, one sec. So we'll start with a little bit about professionalism, which is the foundation of everything we do as operators in childcare. We're going to move on to contracts and policy, which is really the backbone of your business. And then we'll talk about communication, which builds and ensures trust from families in your care. And we'll cover how to set yourself apart in a competitive market. Then we're going to finish with quality standards, which is really how you drive growth in your center and, for future growth of expansion or any new centers you might be planning on opening. I think it's always important to maybe ask, why are we talking about this now? For many of us, we've seen a huge increase in demand in the last few years. We've had large wait lists. And we really haven't had to think of ourselves as having to compete for clients necessarily, because we probably had, 100 other families on the wait list just looking for a space. But that could change at any time. And I think that it's always important to make sure that you have a plan and you know how to really be competitive if the market changes for childcare. I also, if you've sat on any of our lunch and learns in the past, you'll know that we really want to see our operators level themselves up to the professionals that they are, and to ensure that the sector is seen as a professional sector. And some of the best ways that we can do that is by having transparency in our programs, by having high quality standards in our programs, and just making sure that we are treating families with respect and protecting our investment in our childcare centers. I thought this was a great study to put on here just to give you some idea of how important this is for families. So a study by the National Association for Education of Young Children found that over 70% of families ranked professionalism and clear communication among the top 3 factors influencing their decision to choose or remain with a childcare provider. And a lot of us maybe didn't know that that was such an important factor for families. So just getting started, professionalism in childcare. Professionalism really begins with the first impression and extends into the daily practice in your center. It can look like a professional image and demeanor from your staff, from your management, all the way down to your educators. A culture of respect and accountability and continuous professional development. When families see this, they feel confident in your care. They feel that they can trust you with their children. So I think it's really important to make sure that we're always kind of thinking about these things when we're implementing our training of our staff, when we're looking at the whole scope of how we set our centers up and our daily practices, especially around policies. And when we're considering, those professional development opportunities for our center, we realize how important that is in leveling ourselves and our care up for quality. With any of our lunch and learns, if we can, we love to put in some real life scenarios for you guys. I find it's always easier to relate these to daily practice when we can kind of understand what they look like on the ground and in real life. So here's our first real life scenario. A staff member openly vents frustrations about another teacher in front of parents during pickup. We know how frustrating this job can be, and a lot of us, become kind of burned out and maybe reactive to situations sometimes. It's just human nature, especially in such a stressful environment. And this could easily be something that could happen in your center with your team. I think, the solution to this is just an option would be that as management or as your direct supervisor, whoever is kind of in that role in your center, you address the issue privately. Absolutely don't walk up to them in front of the family or in front of other staff. Explain why the behavior is unprofessional and remind the staff member to use proper channels for concerns. Um, Having that moment of understanding with that staff member to kind of clearly explain a better way forward with this, rather than a punitive or something where you're feeding into that frustration in the moment is definitely a better way forward. Preventative strategy would be to reinforce a professional conduct policy, remind staff regularly in meetings, and provide clear avenues to raise concerns appropriately. So I am a huge believer in having very transparent policies for your staff and for your families, making sure that you don't just provide those to them when they're training, that it's an ongoing kind of practice and that they're reviewed every year to make sure they're up to date, and that staff have an opportunity to relearn them and to be invested in them as well. It's a lot when you're training to have all that information put at you at once, and it's not always easy to retain it over so many years if they've been with you. So I should have said this in the beginning, guys, but if you have questions throughout this, please just put your hand up. Feel free to use the chat. We're happy to just have this as kind of an open conversation as we move forward. Here's another real life scenario. A staff member arrives late several times a week. The director addresses it informally each time, but with no documented process or policy reference. Other staff notice the inconsistency and feel the rules aren't applied equally. Again, I think a super common thing that we could see in our workplaces and our centers. Just an easy solution would be for management to meet privately again with that staff member. Never do this in a group setting or in a public situation, always in private. Clearly outline the expectation and link the conversation to policy to ensure fairness. So you would have this in your policy, hopefully in your staff policy. This would be a really good idea to have that policy available for the staff member so that you could go through and just remind them of what the policy is, outline the very clear expectations of staff, and to make sure moving forward that you're implementing with consistency these kind of policies. So you would be maybe looking at applying a written attendance or tardiness policy, ensuring that all staff understand the standard and consequences, not overlooking this. It would be something that after that initial meeting, you look at what the next steps would be, whether it's a written warning or something along those lines if it continued, so that all of your staff understand the policies, but they see you enforcing them with consistency across the board. So again, we haven't necessarily had a competitive market across the board, just with the demand that the CWELC program has kind of created, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't change at any time. And, as we see more centers open up, as we see more options become available for families, we want to make sure that you have some, ability to set yourself apart, to really be competitive in that market. We have seen that some areas, especially in Alberta, there's been different areas that have absolutely been flooded with new childcare spaces. and a lot of centers are struggling to fill their spaces right now. So we want to make sure that you have some support around that. We also know that our funding agreement in Alberta, in Ontario, if you're here from Ontario, will be coming to an end in March, and things could look a lot different in the spring. So if that funding model changes, we may also see a reduction to demand for full-time care or certain types of childcare, making the competition even stronger. So we want to make sure that you're prepared and ready to compete. Families will look beyond just an open space in the future, especially if there are many open spaces and many things to choose from. So we want to talk today about how you can stand out as a trusted, high quality program that parents feel confident in investing in. There are many different ways. I just wanted to put a few kind of easy ones up here for you to just have some thoughts around. So if you're not familiar with this, our association, which I chair, which is called ACE, is partnering on a national accreditation, a national quality initiative under NECPA. So NECPA is the National Early Child Care Program accreditation. This is something that will be coming through Canada, likely the beginning of October, middle of October, something for you to consider on a way to differentiate your program and show that you have a higher standard than what the baseline quality measure is in Canada, which is our regulations. So if you want to learn some more about that, we will put the links in at the end, and I'm happy to answer questions. But you can go directly to their website or to ACE's website, and there's a lot of information on there. That would be a way to stand apart from what kind of the base quality standards are across the country, and show parents that there is extra standards and a higher quality measure in place at your center. You could always look at offering some specialized resources in your centers, adding value through things like STEM programs, sensory tools in your center, cultural resources, or technology that really supports learning. This isn't always easy under certain, financial restrictions. We've had some really good initiatives in Alberta around inclusivity and our Inclusive Spaces grant that would be a really great opportunity if it's opened again here in the fall for you to look at how you can specialize your program, maybe using that grant and bring in some resources that would set you apart from just your average program around the corner. Always enhancing staff training and providing ongoing supports for your staff, maybe some training around literacy, special needs support, inclusion, leadership, anything that you can give them further skills to be the professionals that we know that they are, but to make sure that the children have that support in your program would absolutely set you apart. You would be able to have staff that are not just competent in dealing with difficult situations with children, but are fully there and ready and trained to take on those challenges, instead of putting them in a situation where they're not maybe trained and not supported, and then you can't support those children in your program as well. Offering enhanced programming, this can look like 1,000 different things. I just kind of threw a few ideas up here, but having a music and movement program as part of your center, as having maybe something around the arts and creativity. You could have a visiting artist come in, really having like some art showcased in your center. Our center has done art shows in the past with our children. So having something brought in that really meets like a special need in the community, like music or art or a language program. You can do this in-house. You can always look at bringing in a specialist or a separate teacher or instructor from the community, maybe for one session a week kind of thing. I know a lot of programs bring in like a yoga instructor or a kind of physical component for that gross motor development too, which is always another option. So one thing too, I always wanted to point out is that it's great if you can add these extra programs and extra services to your center, but they really only matter if the families see the value in them. So if you are incorporating extra things to differentiate your program, make sure you showcase them. Make sure you educate your families on the value and really highlight why this matters to the children's development. Don't do it just kind of in secret. Make sure that the parents really recognize that it's going on in your center and show those benefits to their children. You want to make sure that the value that you're bringing to their learning and their development is really showcased, and that it's seen as an extra service and something that really sets your program apart. Here's a real life scenario for you. So, a new parent asks one of your educators, "Why should I choose you over the center 5 minutes away?" The educator shrugs and says, "Well, we're all pretty similar." Um, I mean, that would be difficult to hear if you're the operator. We really would need to make sure that your staff have the tools to articulate your center's unique features. This solution that's provided on the slide is around having a simple elevator pitch that highlights 2 to 3 differentiators around your program. I believe it's really important to bring your educators into the program. Make it part, make them invested in the program. Give ownership to them to really enhance the program and bring their ideas in. It's a lot easier for people to talk about the program in a positive way and really, sell it and showcase it to families when they're invested and they believe in what they're doing as well. So, I mean, having your staff meetings where you talk about all the great things and why it's different, and, how you're investing in the center to make sure that it's different and has these extra resources. Again, don't do that in private. Make sure your staff are involved and that they understand the value that you're bringing to the center in these programs. And have them on your team, making sure that the families hear it from them too, and that they believe in where they work, and that it's a great program. Another real life scenario, a director hasn't developed a clear marketing message. Staff each describe the center differently, and promotional materials don't reflect current programs. So for a lot of us, I know for myself when I first started as well, I never really thought about promoting my center, creating, advertisement and brochures and that kind of thing. But I think having something that is easy for staff to be able to give to a family who's asking some questions around the program, if they happen to stop by your center, just a postcard or a simple brochure or something that has that consistent messaging around your program. And that way, too, if you do have a staff that's struggling to explain or feels nervous communicating with a family in that conversation, they have a resource that they can just hand over, and your message doesn't get lost. Having a unified statement of value for your center, a mission statement around the strengths and the program goals, is really important. And I think that should be something that you develop with your staff in kind of a community and a collaboration to make sure that everyone's vision and input is respected in building that and building the program up. Parent contracts. So we're just going to basically touch on this. I think we could probably do 2 hours on parent contracts and kind of the questions that you should have. How you can implement them, what kind of policies you should have to protect yourself and the family. But a parent contract really safeguards the financial stability and sets clear expectations. They protect against unpaid fees, uncleared withdrawal times, and disputes. I cannot even tell you how many times we see in our chat around, a family not giving notice, and then how do we collect those fees and that kind of thing. Having those very clear expectations listed and written out for the parents when they're registering takes away from at least some of that risk. And then there's nothing unknown. Families are very well informed. Everything is very well presented to them in a clear and transparent way, and it helps with that any kind of misunderstanding. You know that you can't afford to have someone attend your program and take a space and not be paid for it. It costs money, and we need to make sure that our programs are always staying viable, and we're not struggling to keep the doors open. So you don't want to have any unpaid fees, and you don't want to be having, withdrawals from your program that leave you in a situation where you have those unpaid spaces. You want to make sure, again, that they're paired, like a policy and a contract is paired with strong communication at enrollment. You don't just hand it to them without going through them. Make sure that you're walking them through and explaining why this is important and why you have these contract and terms in place, and why you need them to sign it in order to attend your program. For our center, we often do like a parent night, a parent orientation and we walk through the contract and we take questions and we go through the scenarios and explain why we need this certain amount of notice that we do and how important it is that we have the right amount of staff in place. And if a family takes a holiday and is gone for a month, how that impacts, if that space isn't paid, or if they don't give any notice, and how that would impact the center if you can't have those fees coming in for that space and the staff that are there to support it. So I think it's always important to bring your families in, make sure they're invested again in the program and that they understand so that there's no miscommunications in the future. Here's a real life scenario around a parent contract. So a parent argues with an educator about a late fee. No one told me about this. The educator feels stuck and unsupported. So strong communication during enrollment ensures parents understand policies up front. Management should reinforce that staff aren't the bad guys and the contract is the agreed standard. I think, another little bit of insight around this too would be that it may be how you support your staff in these conversations. So, that staff would have kind of the ability to direct that family to the office, maybe to the administrator, so that those kind of questions are handled by someone in a different role than your staff, especially a frontline staff who's now maybe being taken away from ratio to have these conversations with families. No matter how well you communicate things, that there will always be families that forget along the way, and there will be conversations like this. So having consistency, making sure that whoever is representing the program, whether it's a director or a license holder, has a very clear understanding of what the parent contract has in it and the reasons why it's there, and they can answer these questions. I think, again, just a clear process of if parents have questions around this, where do they go and who is the person that is able to answer them in the best way. Another situation would be a director relies on an outdated generic contract that hasn't been reviewed in years. Policies are vague, leaving staff to interpret and explain them to families. Management should regularly review and update contracts, clarify language, provide staff training. A clear, consistent contract empowers staff and prevents dispute. Update these every year at least. So just put it into policy and into procedure that every year you sit down with your admin team or whoever would help you with this. Make sure those policies are up to date because things change. Our funding looks different all of the time under our different contracts. We want to make sure that that's represented in there. You want to make sure that any outdated policies are taken out. And you also want to train your staff on this. So, make sure your staff have seen your parent contract. Make sure your staff have read through it, go through it in a staff meeting with them, and just make sure they understand all of the policies so that if they do have a conversation with a family, they can answer those questions, but that they also feel like there are clear policies in there, maybe around the treatment of staff and what's acceptable behavior from families and those kind of things to protect them as well. So I am a big believer that leadership trickles down. So professionalism, I believe, would be the same. You need to start at the top, and everyone needs to act in a professional way in our centers. Leadership really sets the tone. If management models professionalism, staff will follow. Families will also see the consistency in your staff and your management to make sure that they notice that the leaders are all doing the same thing, that the rules apply to everyone in your center as well. Respectful leadership builds trust, loyalty, and a positive workplace culture. Accountability flows both ways. Managers must hold themselves to the same or higher standards than staff. And I think that is really important if you're trying to build a solid, culture of support in your center, that everyone knows what the expectations are and what the standards are, regardless of role. Everyone is following those standards in your center. Transparent decision-making reduces resentment and promotes fairness. So if people feel like they understand why the decisions have been made the way they have, why the outcome is the way it is, and they know and they can see the clear process steps to get there, it absolutely makes things seem and feel a lot more fair than when things are kind of done behind closed doors or things are in that kind of gray, muddy area and it hasn't been clearly communicated. Always invest in development, whether it's leadership development, professional development for your staff. I think that it is so critical, and that we should be really looking at investing in diversity of professional development in our centers to support all the different roles that we play as educators and operators, whether it's coaching or courses or even being part of like a peer group or community of other operators and professionals, strengthening that professionalism across your whole center. Here's a real life scenario. So a teacher consistently gossips in the staff room and management ignores it because that's just her personality. This behavior spreads and it undermines teamwork. If you've ever been on the other receiving side of a gossiping conversation like this one here, you know that that doesn't feel very good. And it's definitely not professional behavior in the workplace. But your educators would be looking to management to make sure that they're addressing this, and looking for management to kind of enforce and make sure that those standards are met. So management must address unprofessional behavior directly, set clear expectations for conduct, and model respectful communication themselves. Letting things go like that just spreads that kind of mismanagement and distrust across your center. Another situation, the director demands punctuality from staff, but often arrives late themselves. Staff begins questioning why they should follow the rules if leadership doesn't. So again, I think leadership trickles down. So leaders must demonstrate the standards they expect, modeling punctuality, professionalism, and accountability. Holding themselves to the same expectations, they reinforce fairness and credibility. Transparent communication with families. I think if you've been operating a center for any period of time, you will know that the more transparent you can be with communication with families, the easier it is to build those trusting relationships and prevent conflicts. It reassures families that their children are in a safe professional environment and professional hands. Transparent, respectful communication builds trust even when delivering difficult news. Families should never feel blindsided. Proactive updates reduce tension and complaints, and clear systems. So, who shares what, when, and how prevents inconsistent or conflicting messages. Absolutely have these systems in place at your center. What is everyone's role as far as what's communicated to parents? If there is a difficult conversation that needs to be had with the family, what is the process for that, and who is going to be the one having that conversation? I would always suggest too, if you are having a difficult conversation with a family, to have maybe a supervisor with you or to have someone else with you with the family just for accountability and to make sure that there's kind of a team approach rather than to go it by yourself if you can avoid that. Some communication suggestions, and Wayne can jump in at the end here too to kind of give you some suggestions of what child-friendly can do to help you with this portion. But daily updates, I know most of us use some form of like communication app, or whether it's a whiteboard or a newsletter or something. But checking in and sharing children's activities and meals and moods and photos from the day is a great way to have transparent communication to make sure that families can see what is happening. They don't get to see necessarily what their child's day looks like. So they're looking for you to give them that kind of window into what their child's experience has been. Incident reports. And we won't go into like the formal incident reports for regulations, but just for any kind of incident in your center to make sure that you're always documenting and communicating incidents, whether it's just, a small injury, biting, behavioral issues, any kind of changes in behavior for children or changes in, their day. If you have a child that is suddenly having accidents, which is really out of character and they've been fully potty trained for a long time, that's, I would say, in the same kind of category, making sure that you're communicating that promptly with a clear plan for follow-up with the family. So not just saying, so-and-so got bit today and leaving it like that. As a parent, you would want to know what happened, what was maybe the cause of that situation, and what will you do in the future to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen. So making sure you come in with a solution and a follow-up plan. Communication suggestion of having parent meetings. So regular check-ins, maybe quarterly or semi-annually, to discuss their child's development. This doesn't have to be like a formal, teacher interview or anything like that, but having like an open house or just having a way that you communicate with parents on a regular throughout the year, to kind of give them an update on the program and how things are going and where things are going to be going in the next 6 months or as you finish up the year. Just keeping parents informed and making sure that they're partnering in your program with you. Newsletters and bulletins, center-wide updates, policy reminders, upcoming events. I would suggest having these go out at least once a month. Again, it's all about keeping parents informed. If you're adding those enhanced services to your program or enhanced programs like music and art and different things, this would be a really great way for you to showcase them, to show the benefits of them and create that value buy-in from families. Having those hard conversations. So if you do have to have a hard conversation, which you will at some point in this industry, make sure that you have a private setting, a professional private setting that you can sit down with families and have that conversation. Always use a calm tone. Lead with your professionalism, not with your emotions. Lead with positives before addressing concerns. So there's always something positive that you can talk about with the child. And I think parents love to hear that, especially if it's going to be a conversation that is maybe has some negative things in it. And make sure that you come in with a solution and strategies to reassure the parents. So don't just come in and dump the situation on them and then look at them from across the table without any offerings of solutions or next steps. Making sure that you're consistent in all of this communication. Ensure all your staff know what to share, how to share it, so families hear the same message from everyone. Here's a real life scenario around that. An educator avoids telling a parent about repeated aggressive behavior because they don't want to upset them. The parent later feels betrayed when the issues escalate. So I think out of all of the kind of questions that I get when I go into a center, this is sometimes one that does come up quite a bit, where parents will feel blindsided because they feel like they didn't know this was happening, but the educators have seen it happen on a regular for a long time and just not brought it up. I think it's so important to tell parents when things are happening. Train your staff so they can communicate openly but compassionately and use clear messages, clear language, and offering strategies. So parents feel respected when they're kept in the loop. This is their child. They want to be able to know what's happening, and be respected in communicating when there is difficult things coming up with the child, making sure that whoever is having this conversation with the family knows what language to use, has some strategies that they can offer to the family, maybe to use at home as well as what you're going to do in the center, and being prepared for those conversations, not shying away from them. So we're going to wrap up here. This is kind of a brief overview of like what professionalism would look like in childcare. Like I said, I think we could probably talk for days on some of these topics. But just to bring it all together for you before we open it up for questions, that professionalism really sets the tone. Clear contracts and policies protect your business, not just contracts with families like we talked about today, but also your policies for staff as well, should be super clear, and your staff should really understand and know that they're there. Stand out in a crowded market. So what can you do if we need to be more competitive in this industry? How are you going to set your program apart? Transparent communication is non-negotiable. This should be across the board for all situations in your center, whether it's with staff or parents. And quality is more than licensing. So if you are just hitting those regulations, and you think that is a high quality program, I would encourage you to really look at how you can level up that quality, whether it's participating in the NECPA initiative, whether it's offering some higher professional development programs for your staff, or just adding different programs and resources into your center, and that leadership really matters the most. So, it's really important to have a strong leader in your center, whether it's your director or however you structure things. It really matters. So, oops, sorry, wrong way. So yeah, the resources and next steps. So we always like to put a few things up here. We will have our next Lunch and Learn coming up in October already. October 1st. It's going to be very specific to day homes, that one. So anyone is welcome, but we're going to hit on some things for day homes to give them some support. Yeah, I will leave it open if anybody has any questions or just wants to talk through a scenario or something. Feel free to jump on. If you have a question for Wayne about Child Friendly, Wayne, did you want to add anything to this one or?
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much, Crystal. Yeah, I would just say, in general for folks, that might not be using any sort of app support right now, it's always great to support your process using an app. It doesn't have to be child friendly specifically, but it'll definitely enhance, providing a professional experience for your clients from, registration all the way to ending enrollment. There's many things you can do, digitalize your reporting, checklist, contract, keep everything really organized for your center and your clients. With regard to communication, right now we do have bulk emails, instant messaging, daily journals, instant and health reporting where parents can review and sign the reports digitally. And just one quick note regarding our platform. We are launching a learning module next month, so that will have progress reports along with journal integration, curriculum planning, calendars, and more to ensure the development progress and milestones are captured properly for your families. Thank you. Thanks, Crystal.
Thanks, Wayne. That's exciting about the learning modules. Does anybody have any questions or any comments, anything around professionalism that they want to talk about? You can ask us about the NECBA quality initiative if you haven't heard about that yet. Otherwise, I guess we can wrap it up and send you on your way. I appreciate everyone showing up, especially September. I know it's a crazy month and things are so busy in our centers right now, but thank you for joining us, and we'll be back in October. So keep your eyes on your inbox for the next one with the link and all the information for that. There will be resources that are going out after today's session to support you. We've put a few kind of resources around building a contract for parents and some different things that'll be in your inbox. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you, Wayne, for coming today and joining us again. Yeah, have a great day. Have a great day, guys.